The television network scrambled to cut away from the live feed when the damage was already permanently done to the league officials. Allisha Gray completely exposed the massive officiating cover-up in professional basketball on national television during a live CBS broadcast. That arrogant front office genuinely believed they could silence the growing locker room frustration forever. Gray looked directly into the camera lenses and dropped a reality bomb that is tearing the entire professional sports world apart today. 88-83 became the final devastating score on Saturday, July 4, 2026. The Atlanta Dream fought a brutal trench war against the Golden State Valkyries that afternoon. Fans inside the packed arena lost their collective minds as the crucial matchup slowly slipped away from the home team.
Yo, if you love real basketball stories, deep dives, and the drama behind the game, you're in the right place. But if you want to take it to the next level, hit that join button. Members get exclusive content, early access, and behind-the-scenes drops you won't see anywhere else. Plus, you're directly supporting the channel and helping us bring you even better content. So if you rock with Basketball Spilled, become a member today. Let's keep the game alive.
What nobody expected was the real story happening far away from the glowing scoreboard. Sweat completely drenched and exhausted Gray when she approached the network reporter between quarters. Knowing the television microphones were completely hot did not stop her from speaking her mind. She stared straight into the national broadcast lens and firmly stated the refs are trash, but we are moving on from that. Panic immediately froze the entire professional broadcast booth. A tiny pin dropping inside the busy television production truck would have sounded like a massive explosion. Network executives frantically tried pivoting to a commercial break to stop the bleeding. Gray bravely voiced exactly what every single player privately thinks every night but remains too terrified to publicly admit. Putting her entire playing career and vital financial security on the line showed incredible courage. The manipulative league front office desperately wants fans believing she merely felt frustrated about her own shooting performance. Corporate spin doctors will quickly point out her 5 for 17 shooting night from the floor. Pointing to those 17 shots completely ignores the violent war zone she actively dealt with inside the paint all afternoon. Defenders brutally hacked and physically battered her every single time she touched the basketball. Barely surviving the intense physical abuse on the hard court required her to painfully shoot 16 free throws. 16 trips to the foul line tell a gruesome story of unchecked violence. Referees actively let the Valkyries commit absolute physical robbery on the hardwood. Things turned incredibly dark and violently ugly during a massive breaking point in the second quarter. Cecilia Zandalasini maliciously decided to play dirty by taking a completely targeted shot at the Atlanta Star. Zandalasini violently hit Gray right in the face in front of thousands of screaming, shocked fans. Calling that a normal basketball play stretches the human imagination beyond any reasonable limit. It looked like a viciously targeted and completely intentional assault by a highly toxic opponent actively trying to ruin the game. Zandalasini firmly understood the corrupt officials would completely protect her because she represents a massive part of the systemic problem. Gray is an absolute true warrior who completely refused to back down from the toxic bully. She immediately confronted Zandalasini and firmly demanded extreme accountability right then and there. The highly tense situation was completely ready to violently explode into a massive, dangerous brawl on the hardwood. Howard had to desperately sprint across the court to physically hold Gray back from legally defending herself. Howard totally recognized the biased referees were eagerly waiting for a tiny excuse to throw Gray completely out of the building. And this is where it gets worse for the integrity of the sport. Those highly corrupt officials still completely found a sneaky, terrible way to unjustly punish the absolute victim anyway. They violently slapped Gray with an incredibly ridiculous technical foul for having the brave nerve to stand up for herself. Zandalasini throws a vicious, unprovoked cheap shot to the face while Gray absorbs a heavy penalty for naturally reacting. Witnessing that sequence provides the absolute most backward and deeply corrupt officiating logic you will ever see. This is exactly precisely why Gray confidently called them utter trash on live national television. She reached her breaking point with the terrible, blatant double standards and the absolute total lack of basic physical protection. Referees are completely supposed to keep the valuable players physically safe, but they are actively doing the exact terrible opposite. Now the entire massive league front office feels trapped in total absolute panic mode. Their golden protective shield of invincibility shattered permanently through one single honest interview. You can safely bet your entire life savings that a massive, brutal financial fine is rapidly coming down the pipeline very soon. Financial penalties remain the favorite weapon of a league desperate to maintain total control. The corrupt organization maintains an incredibly long and intensely dark history of harshly punishing anyone who dares to honestly criticize their referees. They will aggressively drain a brave player's bank account just to violently force them into permanent, absolute silence. It operates as a completely manipulative, evil system perfectly designed to firmly protect incompetent and toxic officials. But Gray absolutely refuses to care about the penalty money right now in this highly historic moment. She deeply, fiercely protects the core integrity of the beautiful game she dedicated her entire wonderful life to building. The absolute ultimate true professional finally reached a point pushed way past her absolute human limit. The Atlanta Dream are currently reeling from this catastrophic level of completely unfair, biased officiating. They confidently started the season with an incredible 12-4 record and looked absolutely totally unstoppable. 5 straight devastating losses. Later, they currently hold the worst active skid in the entire sport. It is incredibly blatantly obvious why they are violently, entirely collapsing right now. Winning professional basketball games becomes impossible when you actively play against 5 opponents and 3 biased referees every single night. The dark, heavy psychological toll of the constant terrible bad calls is completely destroying their entire locker room momentum. Every single time they bravely try building a massive lead, the corrupt officials magically find a terrible way to immediately stop the clock. A completely phantom foul here and a totally horribly missed travel there completely ruins the entire flow of the game. The brave Dream are being systematically dismantled by the highly toxic people holding the powerful whistles. This issue extends far beyond just an isolated local Atlanta problem either. This entire recent week served as an absolute terrible massive nightmare for the complete total credibility of the entire league. You just have to look incredibly closely at the total utter chaos surrounding the highly controversial Thomas and Clark suspension disaster. The completely panicking league recklessly suspended totally innocent players in that highly intense situation. That chaotic disciplinary action completely proved they possess absolutely zero control over the hardwood. Incompetent referees actively let games turn into dirty, dangerous street fights, and then heavily panic when things finally escalate. Gray dropping that massive, powerful truth bomb on television just beautifully confirmed the terrible officiating crisis spreads completely league-wide. The terrible officials are completely losing their incredibly weak grip on professional reality. They desperately try to quickly cover up their massive, horrible mistakes by violently handing out technical fouls like free candy. But the highly smart, observant fans are fully actively waking up to see the massive, deep cracks in the league foundation. Some foolish, completely clueless people are entirely missing the main point by actively trying to directly, unjustly blame the innocent Dream locker room. Angel Reese actually eagerly stepped right to the hot microphones and brutally stated the entire team lacks any valid excuse for the active collapse. She aggressively, intentionally pointed the heavy, judgmental finger at entirely poor shooting while completely ignoring the massive, glaring referee situation. This terrible, completely selfish action heavily proves how incredibly toxic the current team environment has suddenly become. The highly, deeply corrupt officiating is actually violently effectively turning once loyal teammates entirely against each other in the national sports media. When tired, frustrated players completely stop blaming the corrupt, terrible refs and start blaming each other, the evil league has successfully brainwashed them. Angel Reese, completely threw her brave, loyal teammate totally under the massive moving bus just to completely protect her own corporate brand. She desperately wants to entirely be the absolute golden corporate child of a totally corrupt organization. Eagerly repeating the exact corporate league talking points became her primary focus after the devastating loss. It stands as a completely, massively selfish, toxic move that firmly proves the entire Atlanta locker room is violently splitting into 2 separate hostile factions. You proudly have the absolutely real, gritty, truthful players, exactly like Gray, fighting firmly, fiercely for pure truth on the court. And then you sadly have the highly corporate players, exactly like Reese, actively playing the entire dirty political game for favor. This massive, ugly internal divide explains precisely, strictly why the Brave team is currently losing professional basketball games at a highly historic rate. The totally, absolutely corrupt referees are completely, quietly laughing because they successfully divided and conquered the entire proud dream roster. Reese should absolutely entirely be firmly, proudly standing right exactly next to Gray and aggressively, heavily defending her completely brave television comments. Instead, she instantly, willingly gave the powerful, evil league the exact, perfect, highly corporate soundbite they desperately wanted to hear. The incredibly evil, completely corrupt front office is actively going to use Reese's entirely own words to completely validate the massive, brutal fine they eagerly drop on Gray. It operates incredibly, heavily, completely, deeply manipulative, and entirely massive, utterly unfair to the incredibly real, brave players actually trying to win games. Gray bravely took the absolute entire high road by stating they are entirely moving on, but the massive, terrible damage remains permanently done. The extremely bright, intense spotlight sits absolutely, completely, firmly on the totally corrupt, terrible referees. They are entirely, absolutely terrified of the highly intense, incredibly hot heat radiating from the fanbase. The harsh, completely true, absolute reality proves that the entire loyal, massive, global fanbase exists as a complete, absolute, total war zone right now solely because of this massive interview. The completely, highly smart, pure truth seekers are completely, perfectly defending Gray because she bravely spoke exactly what absolutely everybody else was definitely, secretly thinking. Corporate defenders are aggressively screaming for her to receive a heavy, complete, deep suspension without any absolute accountability for the terrible, corrupt stripes. These incredibly fake fans firmly, deeply, actively want to fiercely protect a terribly broken, entirely, deeply corrupt system. They absolutely, completely cannot handle a strong professional athlete entirely refusing to bow down to a highly, utterly corrupt authority figure. The Atlanta Dream completely, absolutely, desperately need to somehow find a way to quickly regroup before their next highly important game. Thursday brings a scheduled matchup against Seattle where they absolutely cannot afford another devastating loss. The intense, heavy pressure on the entire coaching staff and roster pushes completely, absolutely, totally through the entire stadium roof. They need to completely, actively channel all of this massive, raw anger and absolute, total frustration directly onto the hardwood. If they let the corrupt, biased officiating completely mentally break them, then the entire promising season finishes totally, absolutely, completely, entirely over. Thursday night will definitely prove exactly what kind of absolute, total heart this current roster truly possesses. Will they actively, completely, totally crumble under the massive, heavy weight of the horrible calls and internal locker room tension? Or will they completely, absolutely rise up and aggressively, violently destroy the opposing team just to prove a massive point? Allisha Gray has already completely, perfectly proven that she remains absolutely, totally willing to fight the entire corrupt system alone. Now she completely, totally, desperately needs her entire team to actively, proudly, fiercely stand right exactly directly behind her. The entire completely massive professional basketball world will be completely, totally, definitely watching every single highly intense moment unfold. The corrupt officials created this massive, total disaster, and they will ultimately, permanently burn in the absolute fire they started.